Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Kathleen West? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background in this case. I'll move to the timeline of the death, and then I'll offer my analysis. This case primarily involves two people, Kathleen West and Jeff West. Kathleen, who went by the name Kat, met Jeff in 2004 at a Super Bowl party. At that time, he was an Army recruiter. Ostensibly, they fell in love at first sight. 4 months later, they married in Las Vegas. The couple would have a daughter in 2005. They moved around quite a bit for Jeff's job. In 2014, they moved to Calera, Alabama. Jeff worked as a campus police officer at a nearby college. Kat West had a means of generating income as well. She became a creator on OnlyFans. OnlyFans is a social media platform based in Britain. It was established in 2016. It is designed so that users can charge customers for content posted to the platform. Much of the content is in the form of images and videos. People can put whatever they want up there, but much of the content is explicit. Members pay a fee to have access to the creators they want to see. They can also send private messages and make special requests, like particular behaviors that they would like to see the creator act out. Kat called herself Kitty Cat West and had a couple of hundred members on her OnlyFans account. She was fulfilling special orders as part of this business. Jeff used to help her in the business. For example, he would take pictures of her so she could post them on the platform. Now moving to the evening of January 12, 2018, Kat and Jeff are out on a date night. This is something they did regularly over the course of many years. The couple's daughter was at Jeff's parents'. The couple has dinner at a restaurant. They consumed alcohol there as well. After leaving the restaurant, they stopped at a liquor store and purchased more alcohol. Presumably, after leaving the liquor store, the couple made their way back to their house. After arriving back home, Kat changed into lingerie and asked Jeff to take pictures of her. The next morning, a witness noticed a body on the ground across the street from the home of Kat and Jeff. The body was that of Kat West. Her body was positioned so that her head was on the road and her body was on the grass. A bottle of liquor was positioned next to her on top of her cell phone. Kat had died from a fracture to her skull. She had not been sexually assaulted, although there were signs that she recently had sex. Kat's blood alcohol level was 0.23, almost 3 times the legal limit for driving. The police, of course, wanted to talk to Jeff. He was transported to the station. He was there for about 6 hours. The police described him as cooperative. Clearly, he was a suspect, but the police also investigated a number of other potential connections that Kat may have developed on OnlyFans and her other activities on social media. So, for instance, there could have been disgruntled or otherwise disturbed members that might have harmed Kat. The police couldn't find evidence of homicidal stalkers. Jeff West was charged with murder. Before his trial started, the prosecution offered Jeff an Alford plea. This is a plea where the defendant maintains that they are not guilty, but they admit that the state has enough evidence to convict them. Under the terms of the deal offered to Jeff, he would have been released from jail and only had to serve 2 years on probation. He turned down the deal, and the case went to trial. He would remain in jail for over 2 years before the trial was getting ready to begin. At this point, another plea deal was offered. Jeff rejected this one as well. The prosecution did not have a good case, but they thought they may have enough for a conviction. Not long before the case went to the jury, the prosecution asked the judge if another charge could be added for the jury to consider. This was reckless manslaughter, a felony that carried up to 20 years in prison. The jury convicted Jeff West of reckless manslaughter. He was sentenced to 16 years, meaning he had 13 years more to serve after being given credit for time served. Now moving to my analysis. So the first question here is, was Jeff actually responsible for the death of Kat West? First, let's take a look at the evidence pointing toward guilt, and then I'll look at the evidence pointing toward innocence. On the side of guilt, Jeff had the opportunity to commit the crime. He was in the house along with Kat around the time that she died. Kat was engaged in behavior that could have made Jeff jealous, like this whole thing with OnlyFans. The bottle of liquor found near Kat's body had Jeff's fingerprints on it. Now, it is believed that this is the bottle of liquor they just purchased at the liquor store a few hours before, so his fingerprints being on it would not be surprising. The problem is that the position of the fingerprints suggests he had been holding the bottle upside down, like the way somebody would hold it if they were going to use it to strike someone. Other items related to the bottle: Kat's blood was on the bottle. The bottle had a sliver of glass missing from it, making it appear as though it had been subjected to an impact. And the bottle was positioned on top of Kat's cell phone, as I mentioned. It didn't seem like it could have positioned itself like this through random error, like she fell down and the bottle just happened to position itself on her cell phone. It looked like it may have been staged. Somebody deliberately positioned the bottle in that manner. The next item for the prosecution: Jeff's reaction right after Kat's body was discovered did not seem consistent with innocence. There was a lack of emotion. He didn't ask for any details or updates on his wife's condition, almost like he knew she was dead. Then we have some inconsistencies with the story that Jeff West offered to the police. He said he went to bed at 10:30 p.m. and Kat stayed up. A health app on his phone indicates he was still moving around just past 11 o'clock, or at least his phone was. Jeff also said that he woke up the next morning because his dogs barked at the police who were on the street. But a neighbor said that she saw a figure prior to the arrival of the police pacing back and forth. Continuing with items that make Jeff look guilty, there were 2 pools of blood near the body of Kat West, suggesting it had been moved. There were text messages between Kat and Jeff that appeared to indicate a volatile relationship. The skull fracture was not consistent with the amount of force experienced by falling when calculating in the height of Kat West, and it would have rendered her unconscious immediately. So if she was unconscious immediately, how did she move? Why were there 2 pools of blood? The prosecution's theory of the crime was that Jeff was mad about Kat's drinking and the fact that she had an online presence. He grabbed her cell phone and threw it out onto the street. The phone was cracked. After she went to retrieve the phone, Jeff, who was in a rage, followed her out and struck her with the bottle of liquor. This impact killed her. Now moving to the defense, so items that make Jeff West look innocent. No slivers of glass from the bottle were found on Kat's body, so perhaps the bottle was damaged before and it was unrelated to Kat's death. The skull fracture did cause Kat's death, but what caused the skull fracture was unknown. It could have been an accident. The 2 pools of blood that the prosecution brought up could have come about because Kat fell and hit her head and then stood up and walked a few steps before falling again. Again, the prosecution said that wasn't likely, but technically it was possible. Kat and Jeff were captured on that video in the liquor store, as I mentioned. Jeff was wearing the same clothes when he was questioned by the police that he was wearing in that liquor store video. Yet there was no blood, hair, tissue, or anything else to indicate he was involved in the crime on his clothes. Jeff had no criminal history and no history of violence. Kat's online activities could have attracted a homicidal stalker. So those are the items pointing toward innocence. What are my thoughts on the guilt of Jeff West after weighing the evidence? Well, looking at the legal standard, I think there was reasonable doubt in this case. What really stands out for me is the fact that he had no blood or hair or anything on his hands or clothing. And the alternate theory of the crime, that Kat slipped and fell, is not outrageous. She had a history of getting intoxicated and falling. As far as actual guilt, like not the legal standard, but do I think he actually did it? Yes, I think he's actually guilty. As a campus police officer, he knew that killing her in the house would almost certainly lead to his conviction. He exploited the fact that she had a history of tripping and falling and the fact that she was intoxicated to stage a crime scene that could allow another suspect to be considered. It was a crime scene consistent with Kat's prior behavior. It was possible outside of Jeff committing murder. He throws her phone out into the street, knowing that she would chase after it. He follows her out and quickly hits her with the bottle. He leaves the bottle there on top of the cell phone. It's not clear why he would have done that. He drags her body because her head is positioned on the grass initially, and he knows this wouldn't make any sense. So again, he drags her over so that her head is on the road. Now it looks like she could have hit something hard. She could have hit the road and not something soft like the grass. After this, he goes back to his house and waits, but he's a bit nervous because he just committed murder, so he paces back and forth. This is why the neighbor sees him engaging in that behavior. Running under the assumption that he's guilty, what could his motivation have been? How could he have been okay with taking pictures of her for a long time, supporting her in her business, and then all of a sudden be jealous? So jealous that he skips right past non-lethal violence and commits homicide. Well, here's a theory about how jealousy could work in a case like this. I, of course, don't know what happened in this specific case. Witnesses reported that Jeff and Kat were very different people. Jeff was outgoing and friendly, but he was nowhere near as extroverted as Kat. She was described as an exhibitionist. In looking at the 48 Hours episode about this case, it seems clear that perhaps people were looking at these two and thinking this was not a good match as far as personality, but also there was an attractiveness differential that was marked. It raises the question, why was somebody as attractive as Kat with somebody with Jeff's attractiveness level? Maybe at first the relationship worked out because Jeff felt fortunate to be with Kat, but over time he grew tired of her behavior. He didn't like the idea there was competition. He didn't like other men engaging with her. He felt as though he deserved to have her exclusively. He may have also been tired of people walking up to him and saying, "You're with her?" If this theory is correct, it doesn't explain what was special about January 12, 2018. Why choose that particular evening to commit the crime? But it could explain why Jeff turned down the Alford plea and later another presumably favorable plea deal. Considering there was no other suspect and no other viable alternative theory of the crime, a plea deal would have been the way to go. It seems like that was a good deal. He would have been out of jail right away. Perhaps Jeff was angry. Maybe he felt justified in his actions. Even though he knew that he did it, he still felt as though he should not be punished because he was convinced that Kat's behavior brought on his anger. Again, just a theory. For all I know, Jeff could have been innocent. One last point before I move on to the next item. Kat had a fascination with Marilyn Monroe. There are many parallels between Kat and Marilyn Monroe. We see the substance use, the attention-seeking behavior, and potentially a jealous lover. Marilyn Monroe had been with Joe DiMaggio, and he was not happy specifically with her attention-seeking behavior. It's an interesting parallel, but of course Joe DiMaggio didn't commit any crime, as far as I know. He actually seemed to be pretty supportive of Marilyn Monroe closer to her death. The last item I'll talk about in this video is female exhibitionism. This was referenced many times in the case of Kat West. Kat was very extroverted. She had low self-esteem. It's reported she had bipolar disorder, and of course many people believe she had a problem with alcohol. People said she drank way too much, not even close to the amount of alcohol being consumed by people around her in various social situations. When she would drink, she would sometimes take off her clothes and dance. She appeared to genuinely enjoy posting pictures online. It didn't seem like that behavior was just for the money. The research literature has made interesting observations about female exhibitionism. For example, it's much more socially acceptable for women than for men. At the extremes, it can be a way for a woman to build an online career and for a man to build a prison career. Society's response is much different between the sexes. Another debate in the literature is about what causes it. One major theory says that it is driven by feelings of worthlessness, insecurity, poor body image, and vulnerable narcissism. It doesn't actually have a sexual component. It is a way of attracting attention, and that attention makes the individual feel valuable. Therefore, the behavior taken to an extreme may have some overlap with borderline and histrionic personality pathology. Now, there are other researchers who disagree with that popular theory. They believe the data support a more positive view of female exhibitionism. Interviews with women engaging in similar behavior to what we see with Kat, like posting different images and videos on websites, seem to suggest that they find the activity personally fulfilling, morally responsible, and socially supported, not only by their audience, but by friends and family. Some of the women reported getting an adrenaline high from the behavior, so excitement seeking may be part of it. Interestingly, one of the groups that the women seemed to universally be disgusted by were males with exhibitionistic tendencies, declaring that there was no market for the product that men had to offer, so to speak. I think the concern with many of the creators on OnlyFans and other similar platforms is that these creators will be exploited. What can be empowering and fulfilling for one person can indicate feelings of low self-esteem and worthlessness in another, making that person even more vulnerable to overzealous and manipulative fans. Connecting this back to the case of Kat West, it does not appear as though a stalker was involved in her case, but that was a possibility. There's always a risk when engaging fans on platforms like OnlyFans. These people tend to objectify individuals, be highly sexually motivated, and be socially awkward. So not necessarily a safe group for all people who want to cater to that group. Those are my thoughts in the case of Kat West. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.